Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor. The one, the only, the notorious Conor McGregor.
This is going to be the greatest return in combat sports.
We're not the same. Your guys live into the sky. I'm reaching for other universes.
This is the fight to make.
Much more interesting conversation. Let's say you're in charge. Let's say you're in charge of matchmaking and you believe that Conor moves the needle. Your entire business plan is to have Conor McGregor, and I hear people do this all the time. I've heard so many people say they should be a matchmaker for the UFC, and I'll really lay it on me. What would you do different? And 100% of the time, they'll say, I would put Conor McGregor, and it's like, let me just stop you right there. You don't have to be a good salesman to move the Ferrari. I want to talk to a salesman that can get the Volvo off the lot.
All right, fight fans, we're diving deep into the biggest rumor swirling around the UFC right now. Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway, headlining UFC 329. The idea of this mega fight has everyone buzzing, but let's be real, the thought process behind matchmaking the notorious is far more complex than simply putting two big names together. As you just heard, it's not about being a good salesman for a Ferrari. It's about navigating the unique landscape of a superstar who moves the needle like no other. The question isn't just who he fights, but how do you leverage that fight to maximize his remaining time in the octagon, especially if this indeed happens against Blessed.
How are you going to get him twice? And really think about that. Do you believe that Conor is more likely to get motivated and come back and fight a second time if he wins his return fight, which is next, or if he loses? That really is the question. Ronda Rousey just did an interview. She talked about, I'm never going to fight again when this is done. But she made it very clear that she believes that she's going to beat Gina Carano. In fact, within the statement, Ronda even said, well, I mean, I suppose I could fight again if something crazy happens with me and Gina. And all she means by crazy is that she gets beat.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you get Conor McGregor to fight twice? It's not about the money for him anymore. This isn't your average fighter seeking another paycheck. The speaker brings up a crucial point about psychological motivation. If Conor wins his return fight, does that satisfy his ego, allowing him to ride off into the sunset? Or, like Ronda Rousey hinted, would a loss fuel an immediate desire for redemption? This dynamic is absolutely critical to any plan involving a multi-fight return, especially when we're talking about a potential rematch with a legend like Max Holloway. Will pride override comfort?
So getting into the psychological side of Conor McGregor, do you believe if you need to get him to fight twice, are you smarter to have him win or lose his return fight? I know there's nothing you can do to control that. I'm just asking, what do you think? Does he seem like the kind of guy that if he gets all the power back and he has this wonderful performance and that's the way that he can remember it and that's the way that he can ride off in the sunset? Do you believe that he's going to risk all of that and come back one more time when it's not for a title, it's not for a ranking, it's not in his weight class, and he doesn't need the money? Do you believe that?
Delving into Conor's psychology, if he delivers a dominant performance in his comeback fight, let's imagine a spectacular knockout. Would he truly risk that perfect walk-off moment? He's a man who has achieved everything financially, and titles are no longer his sole pursuit. To fight again, especially a non-title, non-ranking bout outside his natural weight class, would require an extraordinary push. If he's already solidified his legacy with a glorious return, what's the tangible incentive to step back into the fire against someone as dangerous as Max Holloway, risking that final golden memory?
But I'm hearing talk, and this talk is from very good sources, that Conor is going to come back against Max. There's no part of me that believes that's true, aside from the people that are telling me it's true. I have people that would know, people whose job it is to know, and they're telling me it's going to be against Max. But therein lies a little bit more of the problem. If Conor was to come back against Max and things not go Conor's way, right? And Conor has been out for over 1,000 days.
And here we go. The Max Holloway rumors are heating up, coming from sources that demand attention. But let's dissect the immediate challenges this matchup presents for Conor. He's been sidelined for over 1,000 days, recovering from a catastrophic leg injury. Returning against anyone would be tough, but against Max, a man known for relentless pressure and granite chin, it amplifies the risks significantly. The speaker highlights that if things don't go Conor's way in this return, it presents a whole new set of problems for both McGregor and the UFC's future plans for their biggest star.
He's coming off a catastrophic injury, and he would be fighting at 170 pounds, of which he has never held a ranking. And he's fighting a guy who in the last 2 years fought for world championships, a BMF belt of which he won, and a defense of a BMF belt of which he lost. So Max's last 3 fights have all been title fights versus a guy who's been out for over 1,000 days. I mean, you understand where...
Let's be brutally honest about the specifics of this potential McGregor-Holloway clash. Conor is coming off that horrific injury and would be fighting at 170 pounds, a division where he's never held rank. On the flip side, Max Holloway has been a world champion, fought for the BMF belt, and his last 3 outings were all title fights. This isn't just a tough fight, it's a monumental mismatch of recent activity and competitive form. The numbers don't lie. The likelihood of Conor emerging victorious against a prime blessed at this stage, especially at welterweight, is slim to none.
It is very unlikely that Conor is going to win. So now if you're going to get him beat up, you get him beat up by a guy that he once was better than, and we know that because they competed, and you do it at a weight class that neither one of them belongs in. Like, there's really not any room for shelter on that. There's really no coverage for you to hide behind. Where you go, oh yeah, but this is a young guy. This is an up-and-comer. I had the courage and stepped in there with a guy that was 10 years younger than me. I stepped out of my weight class that I've never competed in. I went 5 rounds with a number 8 guy. Like, there's no coverage.
The speaker hammers home a crucial point here. If Conor loses to Max, there's absolutely no shelter, no excuses, no coverage for the UFC to spin. This isn't a young up-and-comer. This isn't Conor stepping in on short notice or against someone significantly younger. Max is a fellow legend, a former rival whom Conor once beat. A loss, particularly a dominant one, against Blessed at an adopted weight class would be a stark reminder of how far the game has evolved since Conor's peak. It leaves little room for a narrative that positions McGregor as still at the elite level.
But do you believe that embarrassment, is that what we should call it? Would that cause an embarrassment to Conor, and that embarrassment would thus motivate him to go out there a second time? It's a very tough scenario to imagine Conor's going to make that walk twice, not to mention his most compelling opponents aren't in the UFC. Like, Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz is still the biggest fight. But Conor McGregor versus Mike Perry has some real legs to it.
Now, let's play devil's advocate. Could an embarrassing loss to Max Holloway actually be the catalyst for Conor McGregor to fight again? Some might argue that a blow to his pride would spark the competitive fire, but even then, what's the next move? As the speaker points out, his most compelling opponents, like Nate Diaz, aren't currently in the UFC. Even a fight against someone like Mike Perry, while intriguing, doesn't quite carry the same weight. The question becomes less about if he'd fight, and more about who he could realistically fight that would maintain his superstar appeal after such a high-profile setback.
Conor McGregor versus George Masvidal is kind of an interesting thing. So none of those are going to happen in Conor's first fight back. So what kind of a result would you need to get in that first fight back, in the return fight? What kind of a result would you have to get that would motivate a rich man to come back and do it again? I think that's a very hard question to answer. If Conor comes out and he was to get a first-round knockout, that would just be an amazing thing, right? I don't think we could script anything better than that if you're a Conor supporter.
Beyond Max, you have names like Jorge Masvidal that spark interest. But the reality is, none of these are likely for Conor's immediate return. So, if he does come back, and let's imagine a scenario where he lands a spectacular first-round knockout against Max Holloway, the ultimate dream for Conor supporters. That's the perfect script for a comeback. But as the speaker questions, would that truly motivate a multimillionaire who's already achieved legendary status to put himself through another grueling camp, weight cut, commission demands, and the inherent risks of fighting again?
Do you think that would make him then want to go back into a training camp, beat the scale, deal with the commission, deal with the drug testers, make the walk, and risk it all one more time? Or what if we looked at the other side of the coin? Conor gets knocked out in the first round. Do you think that would drive him, motivate him, encourage him to get out there and do it quickly? But what do you think the promotion's going to say? The promotion's now going to say, okay, look, you got cleaned up in less than 5 minutes by a guy who's not even in a weight class that we made up just for you.
The speaker raises a critical point. Both a dominant win and a quick loss present profound challenges for Conor's motivation to fight again. If he wins easily, what's the incentive to risk it all a second time? The legacy is solidified. But if he gets knocked out quickly, as hypothetical as it sounds, how does the promotion then justify running it back? The UFC is a business. They can't just throw out massive paychecks for a fighter who's just been cleaned up in minutes, especially if it's against a rival from a made-up weight class for him. It complicates the narrative immensely.
And now we're going to run it back, sell out an arena, give you the biggest paycheck for no title implications, for no ranking, for really no reason at all, and it's going to be your last time. I mean, it's a really tough sell. Historically speaking, what would you hang your hat on there? If you were to point to a time in history, who has ever been in that situation? Who ever got to be a main event on their way out the door? Who ever got a favorable fight when it was their last one? Like, on what grounds would you be making that statement? And I think when you think about it from that perspective, you do understand that Conor's next fight is the final fight.
This is where the business side of the UFC truly comes into play. Running back a fight where Conor loses quickly without title implications or ranking is an incredibly tough sell. Historically, we don't see fighters getting main event slots and huge paychecks as they're on their way out, especially after a clear defeat. The speaker's challenge to find a historical precedent is telling. It all points to one stark conclusion. Conor's next fight, whether it's against Max Holloway or someone else, might very well be his last. The ground for a second comeback simply isn't there.
Conor may not know that or not. None of us know the future. You know what you would like to happen, or you would think when you talk to the principal in a situation like this that would be the ultimate source, but it's really not. As a matter of fact, the principal in a situation like this is probably the last person. They're probably the most unlikely person to be able to stand back and see this board for what it is. If Conor was to lose his next fight, as good at packaging and branding as the UFC is, do you believe they are good enough that they could sell him?
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? Conor McGregor himself might not even realize that his next Octagon walk is likely his final one. While we all love to speculate, the principal in this situation, likely McGregor himself, often has the hardest time seeing the bigger picture from a detached perspective. And if, hypothetically, Conor were to lose this return fight to Max Holloway, the UFC, as good as they are at branding, would face an unprecedented challenge. Could they still sell him as a main event draw, a marquee name, after such a significant setback?
Do you believe that next opponent the final opponent is going to be favorable in the least, right? Like the one thing that Conor really needs as he's coming up on a decision for who his opponent's going to be. He really needs to sell the idea that he's going to make that walk multiple times. The only way he gets a favorable opponent in this next fight, the only way that the guy is even slightly favorable, which Max Holloway would be very favorable. That's a 145-pounder that's going to go fight at 170. Like, that would be a very helpful opponent.
This leads us to the favorable opponent paradox for Conor's return, especially when considering Max Holloway. Conor needs to sell the idea of fighting multiple times to secure a truly favorable matchup for his comeback. And in this context, the speaker notes that Max Holloway, a featherweight legend willing to go up to 170, would, surprisingly, be a very helpful opponent. It's perceived as a winnable fight by some, or at least a legacy fight, despite the enormous challenges. But the cruel reality of the fight game is that no one gets helped in their final performance.
But nobody's ever been helped in their final performance. So we'd have to do a very good job of convincing everybody that this is just a stepping stone, this is just a return, this is the start of something great. Will Conor McGregor fight again? Yes, I believe so. Will he fight twice? No, that I don't believe.
The final conclusion delivered here is stark, yet undeniably logical. To secure a favorable opponent like Max Holloway for his return, Conor and the UFC would have to work overtime to sell the narrative that this is merely a stepping stone, the start of something great. But history tells us otherwise. As the speaker concludes, while Conor McGregor will undoubtedly fight again, the idea of him stepping into the octagon a second time after this comeback, especially if it's against a caliber opponent like Max Holloway, is highly improbable. This truly feels like the final chapter,